𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 and welcome to 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 classes 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪. In this video, I will explain Class 12th Political Science Chapter 3, which is Politics of Planned Development. Now in the last two chapters, that's chapter number 1 and chapter number 2 of this book, we studied the first two challenges that India had to face as a newly independent nation. The challenges were, the first was the challenge of nation building and the second was to establish democracy in the country. Now in this chapter, we will study the third challenge, which is to have development in the country, ensuring the well-being of all the sections of the society, how the economic development of the country took place. That will be the major point of discussion in this chapter. As for the first two challenges, we saw that India chose a path that was difficult and different from what others as a newly independent nation chose. And for this challenge too, India chose a difficult and different path. However, the thing that was different was that this challenge was much more tougher and enduring. So the consequences would be much more limited. The results would be much more limited for this kind of development. So basically in this chapter, we will see that how the development, the economic growth of the country, the economic development of the country took place. What were the debates about development in the country? What kind of development strategy was adopted by the political leaders at that time, and why did they choose that development strategy? If they had chosen that development strategy, then what were the achievements and limitations of that strategy? And if they had chosen it, if it was having many good consequences, then why was it abandoned in the later years? These will be the major point of discussion in this chapter. So without any further ado, let's get started with the first topic, which is political contestation. Now, for understanding this point, let's have a look at an example of Odisha. As you already know that Odisha has a great amount of iron ore reserves. It has one of the largest amount of untapped iron ores in the country, and that is why it is seen as a destination for investment by the government. The state government of Odisha has signed memorandum of understanding with many international and domestic steel makers. Now, from a point of view, it looks like there will be much more investment in the state, there will be much more development in the state, but that's not the real case. Many of the iron reserves in this state are in the underdeveloped regions, the regions which are inhabited by the tribal people. And for those tribal people, the setting up of industries means that they would have to leave their houses, they would have to leave their livelihood and would have to be displaced in some other regions. So clearly for them, that's not development. Similarly, for environmentalists, the setting up of industries would really mean a bad thing. So we can say that a single thing, that is the industries, the investment in the state, can mean various things for various sections of the society. So which section of society should we listen? What can we say that is Odisha's need, is Odisha's development? Because for the government, of course, that's a part of development, that more investment is being done in the state, more industries are setting up. But is it really the development if the sections of the society are not happy with it, are having many problems? So we can say that a single thing can mean different things for different people. It can be development, it can be destructive for any person. So what is a development? Can there any be definition of development in this case? Of course there can't be. The final decision has to be taken by the political leaders who are the representatives of the people. Of course, in this case we will look at the decision, the advices of experts, the advices of environmentalists, the advices of the tribal groups, the advices of every person, but the final decision would have to be taken, or would have to at least be approved by the people themselves. Then only can we say that it's a development. For development, what is needed is that the interest of one section of the society is compared with the other section of the society, with the interest of the other sections of the society. So we see that the interest of which social group is more important. important, is higher in the level, then only can we agree on some instincts. So we can say that there cannot be a single debate, there cannot be a single decision about development. There will be various conclusions, there would be various debates about development, and that is why over the years many political contestation have been taken. Since independence it has been going on. Even today, whenever a decision has to be taken, you see that the ruling party's opinion would be different, the opposition's party would be different, having different opinions. So we see that different leaders have different opinions for different social groups of the society. So what about the social groups of the society? The farmers, the industrialists, the capitalists, can we give them the power to make development of the country, to make decisions for development of the country? Of course we can't, because if, for suppose, let's say that we are giving the power to farmers, then what would happen? Only the development of that section of the society would be seen, and we don't need that. We need that all the social groups are uplifted. The development should be taken for all the sections of the society. And hence, one thing that almost everyone in the country agreed upon was that in India, development should mean two things. First is, of course, the economic growth of the country. Second is the social and economic justice in the country. So it should not be that marginalized sections are left out. Their development should also take place. Another thing that many people had agreed upon, that government should be the one to take decisions. However, what role does government play? Is it that government should own all the major businesses of the country, all the major industries of the country? Is it okay to have a centralized institutions in the country to take decision for all the economic growth, for all the economic development of the country? These were the debates that were going on about the development in the country, and that's why we say that whenever the task of development was given, since independence, after independence, at least for 2 decades, a large amount of political contestation could be seen. Various debates, various arguments were given by different political leaders of that time. Now here the next topic that comes is ideas of development. So ideas of development. Now at the time of independence or after the independence, immediate independence, what was the thought of the political leaders, the experts or the common people about the development? Of course there were contradictions, there were debates about development, but the idea of development was overall the same. Similar to the present, even at that time, the political leaders, the experts of that time thought that the Western countries, becoming more like the Western countries, is becoming more modern or becoming more developed. So West was seen as a standard for measuring the development of different countries. The idea of development meant about becoming more like a modern country, and becoming modern meant about becoming more like West. So we can say that the European countries, the American continent countries, these were considered as the epitome of development even at that time and even now. So that's why the experts, the common people, everyone thought that if India wants to be developed, then it should be considered more Western. It should become more Western. And becoming Western, the Western ideology meant that the breaking down of the social structures, the traditional social structures, and in country there will be capitalism and liberalism. Well, after the eve of independence, India had two options before it. One was the model of economic development in the European countries and the US, which was based on the idea of capitalism and liberalism. The second was on the model of USSR, which had seen the social development based on socialism pattern of the society. So Indian leaders at that time, Indian government at that time had two options, and without a doubt many people were deeply impressed by the model of the USSR, the socialist pattern of the society, the development of the USSR. The Socialist Party of the country, leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru, the Communist Party of the country, all supported the model of economic development in the USSR. Well, due to colonial government in the country, we had seen that what kind of economic development they had been doing and what was their economic development model. So of course capitalism and liberalism was not at all a choice for the Indian leaders, because the main focus had to be the poverty alleviation in the country, had to be the socialist party of the country. So we can say that for the idea of development, it meant becoming more West, and we had chosen the model of Russia, at that time the USSR, the Union of Socialist Russia. So we can say that socialist pattern of the society was seen as an economic model in the country. So if it was chosen as an idea of development, as a model of development for the country, then what was the planning? So let's see the planning for development as well with the next topic, which is planning. Now, it was a very well fact that everyone wanted the intervention of the government of India for the planning of economic development in the country, for the planning of setting up of industries, of all the economic development of the country. And it was not just the common people who were supporting this idea, even the industrialists, the private sector people, the businessmen, the entrepreneurs were supporting this idea. Why? So normally people think that all those private people, private sector industries, the industrialists, the businessmen, the entrepreneurs are averse to the ideas of planning, or are averse to the intervention of government in planning of economic development, but that was not the case here. You know what, that in 1944 Bombay Plan was set up by big industrialists, big business entrepreneurs. They had drafted a plan which was on the model that the government would be the one to make decision to do the planning for the industries, for the economic growth of the country. So we can say that for the planning of the government, the responsibility to the planning to the government was given by the industrialists themselves, and on the basis of Bombay Plan, the Planning Commission of the country was set up after independence in March 1950. Now, if you remember in class, we had a political science book of Constitution at Work. In that book, did we ever study about Planning Commission? We didn't, because Planning Commission is not one of the commission or other bodies set up by the Constitution of India. The Planning Commission is set up by a normal act of the government of India, and it has just an advisory role in our government. Its recommendation become effective only when they are approved by the Union Cabinet. So we can say that it has an advisory role in our government. And what was the work of Planning Commission? Of course, doing the planning, the economic planning of the country was done by the Planning Commission. Well, at present we don't have a Planning Commission, because in 2015 the Planning Commission was replaced by another institution, which was NITI Aayog, the National Institution for the Transformation of India. So we can say that NITI Aayog is a new institution, new organization which was set up by the government of India, replacing the earlier Planning Commission of India. Now, what had Planning Commission done in the country? Let's see that with the next topic, which is the early initiatives. Now, when we say about the early initiatives, of course, the Planning Commission of the country has set up the 5-year plans in the country. What were the 5-year plans? As the name suggests, it was a kind of planning which was done for the next 5 years for the economic growth of the country. It was also in the line of USSR, because you know that in 1940s and 50s, the planning of the government had gained a lot of popular support. It was due to many reasons. We know that Second World War had ended then. So of course the interwar reconstruction of economies of countries like Germany and Japan played a role here. Another thing was the spectacular economic growth of USSR at that time against all the heavy odds, because no one ever thought at that time that the USSR would see such a good economic development in the world. We have also seen that in the next book of this class, which is about the world politics, we will see about Cold War between the Russian bloc and USA bloc. So we will see in that there also that the economic growth of USSR was spectacular at that time. Another thing about the Great Depression that Europe had to face. race. So we had already seen that what should be the economic growth of the country, what should be the planning for the economic growth of the country, and that's why in the model of USSR we had chosen the 5-year plans for the country. The first 5-year plan was initiated or was started in 1951. It was for the period of 1951 to 1956. After that, you know what, that first 5-year plan had gained a lot of popular support from all spheres of life, be it the politicians, be it the journalists, be it from academics, be it from any sphere of life. All were debating the document extensively. All the provision of the first 5-year plan was debated among the public, and they were extensively debated among the common people. So we can say that it had gained a lot of popular excitement and support at that time. After that, the second 5-year plan came up in 1956, and then the third 5-year plan came up in 1961. Now the excitement was at its peak to the second 5-year plan. When the second 5-year plan was started, the excitement with that document was at its peak. Now this excitement declined after the end of third 5-year plan, and that is why after the third 5-year plan, the due date for the next 5-year plan was the 1966 year. But at that time, the government of India set up a plan holiday, which meant that from the period of 1966 to the period of 1969, the Indian government did not start any 5-year plan, and the fourth 5-year plan, which was to be set up in 1966, was started in 1969. So we can say that was because of the acute economic crisis that India was facing during the period of 1960s and 70s, and that was the reason why the 5-year plans after the third 5-year plan was not supported that much. Another thing in 5-year plan, that the advantage of 5-year plan is that it is a kind of planning for the government to work on a larger picture, because for the next 5 years you have made plans that on which thing you're going to spend your budget. There are two kind of parts or two kind of budget that are divided in the 5-year plans. First is a non-planned budget, which is spent on the routine items on a yearly basis. Second, which is planned budget. That means that for the next 5 years you have completely planned that you will spend this much amount on this thing. So we can say that there are two kind of categories in the 5-year plans. For the state and central budget, for both the budgets we have this kind of categorization. And after the third 5-year plan, as India was facing the acute economic crisis in the country, that's why there was a plan holiday, and the next fourth 5-year plan was started in 1969. So what were the first and second 5-year plans about? Let's study about them as well with the next topic, which is the first 5-year plan. So the first 5-year plan. Now, as I already said that the first 5-year plan was started in 1951. It was for the period of 1951 to 1956 for the 5 years. Now, at that time, a young economist who was involved in drafting this document, 𝓒𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪, said that India should hasten slowly for at least a decade after independence for the economic growth in the country, because he said that statement that India should hasten slowly, which means that the speed of economic growth should be slow. It should not be too fast, as a fast rate of economic development means that there can be endangerment to democracy of the country, and that's why he wanted patient, all the economic leaders, all the political leaders of the country to be patient and should hasten slowly for the economic growth of the country. Well, for the first 5-year plan, the main focus was the agricultural sector of the society. Why agricultural sector? Because it was hit the hardest by the partition of the country, and it needed urgent resolution, it needed urgent attention for development, for economic growth of the country, and that's why for the first 5-year plan the major focus was for agriculture. And of course, if you are focusing on agricultural sector, then you need to focus on irrigation, on dams as well, and that is why he huge allocations for big large scale projects in the country, such as 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 Dam, were made with the lining of the first 5-year plan. So we can say that many dams, allocations for many large scale projects for irrigation, for dams in the country were set up after in lining with the first 5-year plan. After which we saw that in agricultural sector the biggest obstacle was the land distribution pattern of the country, because before independence there were many zamindars, there were many landlords who were covering up a large part of land of the country, and that's why the poor peasants, the actual peasants of the country, were not owning any part of land or were holding very small parts of land. So of course land distribution had to be done, land reforms had to be done. So that's why the land reform part was also a main focus in the first 5-year plan. Another thing which is focused upon in the first 5-year plan was that the national income of the country should be increased. And how it would be increased? Of course, if the savings are more than the expenditure of the people. And in the 1950s, the people of the country were already spending too less, so it could not be reduced anymore. So what could we do? Of course, we had to make savings up. We had to get more savings for the total increment of the national income of the country. But the problem was that the total capital stock of the country was less than the employable people of the country. So there was kind of imbalance between the total capital stock and the employable people of the country. So of course the savings could not go up, and that is why after many economic reforms the savings did go up very little bit in the first 5-year plan, in the second 5-year plan, and very less in the third 5-year plan, and they declined consistently in the 1970s after the third 5-year plan. So we can say that major focuses in the first 5-year plan was that the speed of economic growth would be slow. Second was the agricultural sector. Third was the allocations were made for irrigation and dams project in the country. Fourth was the total increment of the national income by giving the savings up of the country. Another thing was that the first 5-year plan, as I already said, that was too popular for the country. Even though many critics came up, many disadvantages were there in the third 5-year plan and the fourth 5-year plan, but overall whenever we say about the economic development, the foundation of the economic growth of the country was set up by the 5-year plans of the country, at least the first, second 5-year plans of the country. Now the second 5-year plan was about rapid industrialization. It was just the opposite of the first 5-year plan. The first 5-year plan was about patience, about hastening slowly, but the second 5-year plan was about rapid industrialization, rapid economic growth of the country. There was a very good economist at that time who was P.C. Mahalanobis, who wanted India to grow very fastly, very quickly. There should be rapid industrialization, be it private, be it public. And that is why a lot of infrastructure was set up under the second 5-year plan. So we can say that the main focus in the second 5-year plan was the industrialization. Another thing was that India at that time had imposed tariff barriers on imports of the country so that the domestic markets could be supported, they could have very good upliftment. Otherwise what would happen? The foreign markets would be investing in the country and the domestic markets would be unable to compete with them. So to prevent that competition, we had to impose tariff barriers on the import of goods and services in the country. And after this tariff barrier, the private sector and the public sector both went up. The railway industries, the railway sector, the communication sectors, the steel industries, the machineries of the country all saw a very good growth in the country. But there were some disadvantages with this rapid industrialization as well. Well, the second 5-year plan and the third 5-year plan were not that much different. There was only slight difference between them, and people, the critics at that time, saw that there was kind of unmistakable urban bias in these 5-year plans, in the third 5-year plan at most? Well, the main focus was on industrialization rather than on agriculture. So of course, as the industrialization asked for more foreign investment, India could face food shortage at that time, and that's why India was facing some kind of economic crisis. So we can say that due to having so much urban bias, many critics came up. After that, we already know that for setting up industries you need good technological advancement in the country as well, and after independence India was not having that much technology in the country. So for gaining technology, it had to exchange its precious foreign exchange with the other countries, with the global market, to gain that technological advancement so that it could set up industries in the country. And with that foreign exchange, we can say that a lot of development went down, because we had already spent a lot of amount on gaining that technology. So we could say that in the global market we spent a lot of foreign exchange. So there were some points which were seen wrong in the 5-year plans, and that is why after the third 5-year plan it was seen that people's support to these 5-year plans declined a lot, as India was facing a lot of economic crisis. So we can say that due to having urban bias, and many people also said that the main focus should be the agricultural based industries rather than the heavy industries such as steel or iron. So of course there were many kind of contradictions between the critics as well. So we can say that due to these reasons the 5-year plans were not that supported after the third 5-year plan. Now the last topic of this chapter is what is left and what is right. Now you must have seen that many political parties, many political groups, or many candidates, many political leaders are said to have a leaning or an ideological bias towards leftist policy or rightist policy, or leftist ideology, rightist ideology. So what does right and left mean? Well, in terms of economic development, it means that the social position of the concerned group, how it sees the effect of the government's intervention, how it sees the economic growth of the country, how according to the concerned group there should be development in the country. When you say left, it means that those people are towards, you can say that the downtrodden sections of the society, the poor sections of the society, they believe in the intervention of the government in making of the policies for the economic growth of the downtrodden people, the poor sections of the society. On contrary to that, there are rightist people. Now those belonging to right ideology believe that there should be free market and free economic growth of the country. These alone can make sure that there is equal economic growth of all the people. So according to right ideological people, you can say that it means that there should not be unnecessary intervention of the government in making of the economic growth or economic planning of the country. So we can say that both are contrary to each other. Another thing is that leftist ideology is more keen towards the rights, towards liberty, towards equality, towards, we can say, progress of the country, while the rightist ideology is more keen towards tradition, towards hierarchy, towards our past, towards, you can say that many other things. Both are contrary to each other. Towards hierarchy, rightist is more keen towards, and at present our ruling party of India, which is Bharatiya Janata Party, belongs to rightist ideology. And at the time of independence, at least, the INC was seen as a centrist kind of party, though it was seen as a leftist party, but we also can say it as a kind of centralist party because it was having many factions, as we already saw in the last chapter. So we can say that whenever you're saying about political groups, it also becomes important whether it is having the left ideology or the right ideology. So that's all we have studied in this chapter. In this chapter we saw about development. What did the development mean at the time of independence, after a decade of independence. We saw that after independence, development meant different things for different people. For a steel industrialist, for an industrialist, it meant different. For a tribal person who was living in that region was meant different. For a consumer of electricity, it meant different. So of course, for different people, there were different developmental goals. We saw that there were a large contestation about development, which was for a long time. So it led to contradictions, it led to debates, arguments for development in the country. But overall, West was seen as a standard of measuring the development. So the countries were divided as developed, underdeveloped, or developing nation based on Western countries. So it was kind of standard for measuring the development. Then we saw about the first 5-year plan, the second 5-year plan, the planning commission, the Bombay plan, and leftist and rightist ideology. So that is all we have covered in this chapter. I have covered all the topics and subtopics, and the next chapters of this book will be covered in the further upcoming videos. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. Thank you very much.